Welcome everyone to our Zoom with Kevin Annett. This is September 30th, and we're doing a Zoom call. We have about 13 participants right now on, and Kevin's joining us. I'm Dr. Dina Churchill, innovator in health and wellness, and I guess my claim to fame was that I surrendered my chiropractic license after I seen the corruption in the system, and not only the health department, but also in the media. So I was starting to ask questions about vaccine injuries that I was seeing in my practice, and my license was suspended. And then the media sort of dragged my name through, through their headlines for a little while. And that was my eye-opening moment to the corruption that lies within the system. So I started researching common law and came across Kevin. And this to me looked like an alternative to the corrupt system that really I wasn't having any leeway or headway within. So I met Kevin a few months ago, and together with a bunch of people here in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick and Newfoundland, we've set up the Atlantic Common Law Assembly. And that was set up on September the 18th. We had 28 members sign the charter, 8 by proxy, and we've just been growing and learning ever since. So we're really grateful to have you on the call. Again, if you're just coming in, please feel free to sign in the chat box. Keep your mic muted and your video off because the call will be recorded. I'm just going to admit someone else in here now. Great. So that's a little bit about me and how I learned about common law, or why I got interested. It was really out of desperation of not having any leeway and not being able to make a difference in the other system, and feeling rather depressed about that. We will take some questions from the chat box intermittently throughout, but we'll first look at some of the questions that the members have sent in. So maybe what I'll do is just announce you, Kevin, first. This is Kevin's book, one of the 17 books that he's written. I think I should qualify this actually, because I had a few questions about this today. Kevin's not our leader, right? Kevin is a global advisor in the common law movement. So we are not bowing to Kevin. I really like him because I think he's an honorable man. He has guts and gumption, to stand up against the church and state, and really had to sacrifice a lot personally in order to do that. But we, the people of the Atlantic Common Law Assembly, really hold the power. So if Kevin should happen to disappear from the earth, we would still continue. And I think that's an important decision. So in having these calls, it's really so we can be inspired and we can learn and be educated, but it's not Kevin as our leader. We lead ourselves, and we're looking to other common law people and experts that have really shown true value and have worked the system to look for guidance for us. So Kevin Annett is a Nobel Peace Prize nominee, 2014 and 15, recipient of the Peg Priest Award, community minister, human rights consultant, special advisor to the International Tribunal of Crimes of Church and State, award filmmaker, lecturer, broadcaster, author, born in Edmonton, Canada in 1956. He organized the first public inquiry into crimes in Canadian Indian residential schools. That was in 1998 in Vancouver, and again served as the chief advisor to the International Common Law Court of Justice in Brussels in its 2 criminal cases against the Vatican, the Crown of England, Canada, and its churches for crimes against humanity, and forced the resignation of Pope Benedict in 2013 and his other sex-offending friends. So thank you. Welcome, Kevin.
Thanks, Dina. Always good to be with all of you.
So maybe we'll start. So if you're just coming in, we have a few more people coming in here. If you're just coming in, welcome. We would love you to keep your mic muted and your video off, but do come to the chat box and let us know. Oh, Norm's here from New Brunswick. Great. Hi, Norm. Nice to see you. If you can put your questions into the chat box, maybe the city, town where you're from, that would be great. And I don't know if you want to start, if you have a sort of an opening or something that you want to say, Kevin, before we get into the questions.
Well, there's numerous issues that have been talked about all over the place, but a few things keep surfacing all the time, and maybe people are going to ask about this. Question of enforcement. It's a big one for people. How do we enforce decisions we make in the assemblies and the courts? Second issue is sheriffs and how do they deputize the existing police to work for us? And the third was the whole issue of education. We have to be trained in the principles and the values that we ourselves come up with and define right in our assemblies for us to do this work. So talking about two levels of education for people within the assembly, and then the leadership element, because they're a natural group and they have to have a different kind of training in a way. So wanted to talk at some point about all of that, but that's, of course, if that's something people want to get into, or maybe you've got thoughts of your own about any of that.
So maybe we'll start with this question that came in from Ontario. We have 90 members from all across Canada, and we have a few members that joined from Ontario. Now, this particular man was from London, and I thought it might be great to sort of set him up with a representative or a local assembly there. Do you have a contact in London, Kevin, that you could send me for?
The people in London, there's 8 or 9 of them, I believe, and they're still organizing their first meeting. So I can definitely send his name to them, and I've got to check back with them. It's one of dozens that are organizing right now. So, but I can give you that information for sure.
Okay, that'll be great. So his question was, is there a way that people can force politicians to reduce their pay or their benefits to the same extent that they've forced us similar reductions on people?
Well, it's getting harder and harder these days to force politicians to do anything, because there's a trend across the country. It started in BC, and now the feds are talking about doing the same thing. They introduced a bill called Bill 19, which passed unanimously in the BC little rump legislature they have, and it placed politicians above the law, basically. It said you can't sue them anymore. They have the protection that Big Pharma got in the 1980s, where since 1986, I believe, in America, you cannot bring a lawsuit against a big pharmaceutical company for damages. And now the politicians are protected by that same legislation. So, when they put themselves above the law, above any kind of accountability, the means within the existing system are shrinking to nothing. And with the courts closed by and large, or backlogged in their cases years, there isn't any recourse except what we create. And that's the recognition about the assemblies. Not only is it a good idea, but it's a practical necessity more and more for people to organize themselves and make that change themselves. So not so much even looking at the existing politicians. They're like a vestigial organ that's hopefully going to drop away someday as power gets established on the ground. Reality right now that you're really banging your head against a wall working through the system, which isn't the system we grew up with. It's been radically changed. That's the point. We're living in a different kind of society now.
Kevin, you're breaking up a little bit there. I don't know if your connection's not good. If there's another place, we'll keep going. Your voice sort of breaks up at your video as well. But anyway, we'll keep going.
Well, this is all I've got. So I don't, we'll have to make do, I guess.
Can't put your antenna off or something, no?
You're asking the wrong man. I don't know anything about the technical stuff.
Okay. So my thoughts on that, when I heard that question, was really, it's a philosophy that puts the power at the top that has really created this whole paradigm, right? So the idea of arresting the leader, to me, is erroneous, because if you understand the powers in the people, then you can shift that, right? We're all underneath kind of holding up these politicians. We're voting them in. Just like, we're buying genetically modified foods and we're keeping these big companies in business. So Tammy Canal, who started the March Against Monsanto movement, she was hoping to have a few hundred people, and now she has millions around the world. And she says, we have to vote with our wallet, right? We have to demand certain things. So again, just thinking we're going to arrest Justin Trudeau and the problems are going to go away, or Dr. Robert Spang, is, really a fantasy, because they're really a symptom, right? I think of a bigger problem. And for me, it's about owning our power and empowering people. And I love the common law platform, because it's not just about masks and mandatory vaccines. It's about glyphosate being sprayed on the trees. It's about, unfairness that's happening in our world. So I think that question needs to kind of be reframed in not so much looking at one politician, but how are we going to defund the corrupt system? Like, take away, stop paying them our taxes, right? Stop voting
Right.
for them is what I think.
Right.
So another member said, and I was so grateful for this, I won't mention his name because I don't know if he wanted me to, but he's here in Nova Scotia, and he sent a letter to doctors of Nova Scotia asking about, these mandatory masks and relaying some of the research. And, the reply was that they're really just following the orders from, higher up power. So, anyway, I don't know if you had a comment on that or not, of approaching, professional organizations with the COVID restrictions and the laws that were passed by the NCCLA.
Well, I couldn't have said it better than what you just said, Dina, in terms of reversing the energy flow and taking back our power. And with professional groups, it's funny, the more formal education you tend to get in society, the more you're kind of mentally tied up in the system. And I find a lot of the people who really lead this movement on the ground are people who haven't had a lot of formal education because they don't have the assumptions that go with the education. That is, there's only the existing system to deal with. We can't create our own. Well, actually we can, and that's in fact our only safeguard. So I think absolutely getting doctors and others on board, but say to them, we're not oriented vertically, we're oriented horizontally within our own communities. Is that power. We have to get back to that anyway, because it's a totally hierarchical, centralized system we're in, and it's breaking down anyway. So we have to reestablish that. So bring them to us. Yeah.
Yes, Norm from New Brunswick says, from where do politicians believe they've acquired or qualified for sovereign immunity? It was seriously impacted by the Westminster Statute in 1931.
Well, again, it's the system in Canada defines sovereignty in only one way. It's what the Queen has. The Queen is the sovereign, capital S. And but no, that's not the meaning. The original meaning of Commonwealth was everybody. When Parliament abolished the British monarchy in 1649, briefly, they referred to the sovereign as the Commons, which is people in assembly, which is exactly what you created. You created the people in assembly. That is the sovereign body. You don't have one sovereign. The people are collectively sovereign. That's why they can bring in laws that are binding on people, because what we did in the Council of Assemblies is more representative of real democracy than these COVID regulations, because that came out of the mind of, frankly, the big pharma lobbyists telling the top bureaucrats, you're going to do this, right? And they did it. And so now everyone's confirming, well, that's not democracy in any stretch of the imagination. We're establishing it really for the first time,
Well, that's an interesting point too, right? It's like we can't go to page 14 and figure out how to kind of defund the World Health Organization. We're all just sort of moving along and discovering how to do it as we're going.
Right.
So maybe that would tie into the question that Frida asked about how to become a citizen of the Republic, and what does that mean? Citizen versus a member in our assembly.
Have a lot of people in your community being part of the assembly without taking out citizenship, because that's got to be done through a certain awareness of what you're doing. You go to the Republic of Canada site, republicofcanada.ca, and you'll notice one of the titles says Oath of Citizenship. And when you look at that, it's a PDF document. You can download it, sign it, scan it, and email it back to us. And at that point, citizenship card is issued. Now, the citizenship card it's two-sided. On one side, it says you're basically renouncing any allegiance, real or implied, to the Crown, Queen Elizabeth, her descendants, or any of the laws of the Dominion of Canada. And on the other side, it says I'm basically taking out citizenship in the Republic, and I'm protected by its jurisdiction and laws. So it's really declaring independence from Canada and going into a new nation that we are creating on the ground. And that's kind of the formal steps to do it. At that point, you're expected to be involved. We recommend finding 2 other people and forming a staff of 3 people who can educate themselves, start doing activity. And we want to set up citizenship schools. That's one of the things we're working on now, getting a curriculum together for what it means to be a citizen. Having a role, this is the thing, you're not just entering something that's already formed. You're forming it yourself by taking out citizenship. For example, in your local groups and in the assemblies eventually, you'll debate, what do you want Canada to look like? What do you want in the Constitution? What are the principles in the Charter of Liberties? Those are things that you can have a role in doing. So getting into the ground floor now, you can help create the vision and the system, the institutions, the Constitution of the Republic, all that, right? So that's kind of the steps. But again, I believe it's important because people who are at the point where they realize they want to break from this criminal system, you got to be united in an alternative. And that's more than just an assembly. It's actually belonging to a different nation altogether. And that's really the idea behind it. Also getting a book, we'll give you a copy of the Case for Canada, which is kind of the outline of, at this point, the vision and the program that was adopted 5 years ago in Winnipeg when it formed.
I think, though, that's what scares people, is the idea of leaving that system, leaving pensions, leaving the medical system. But you don't have to do that initially, right? We've talked about this in a number of different calls. You can be present in both systems, parallel in both systems. Because
you relate to the Canadian system as a capitalized corporate fiction. And you can keep that corporate fiction. It's not you anyway, but the real you is part of this new nation. So they can coexist, and you don't have to suffer that right now. Eventually, we'll have alternative systems. We're not at that point yet, right?
Mm-hmm. So another member has said, we have given the government a deadline of September 30th to end the COVID measures, and they have not. What is our plan of action in response to this for October 1st?
There's going to be a thing coming out tomorrow about that. What we've done is we've basically made them an offer saying, we're holding you to be accountable under this law that was passed. We want you to cease and desist. If they don't by tomorrow, then it's under law, it's called a default notice. You basically say you're in violation of a law. We can now take any action necessary to achieve reparations and justice for ourselves. Now, we already have that right under Magna Carta, Section 61. If the Crown defaults on its obligation to the people, Crown land can be seized. Anything related to the monarch, except his own life and person, can be seized, right? So lawfully, we have the right to do anything: seize public buildings, seize the land, declare Crown land is now under the jurisdiction of the Republic, that kind of thing. Land occupation, the whole bit. And on top of that, though, is we've already put them a notice that we're going to stoke up actual civil disobedience, that is active non-cooperation with these laws. So, for example, I had a good example of this today. There was one of our members on the coast who was taking a ferry into Vancouver from the Sunshine Coast. And at the beginning, the ferry announcement is always, you've got a mask, you've got a distance. Okay, so this guy had a friend in the bushes near the ferry with a big bullhorn. And after the official announcement, they went on the bullhorn and said to everybody, these laws are now unlawful under the Common Law Assembly, the Council of Assemblies law of September 8th, established by the people in Assembly. Anyone who masks and distances and follows these regulations is committing a crime, and you're subject to fines and being tried in a common law court. And then they took off, right? Apparently, one of the guys hanging around watching, he said people were really confused, and they were looking at each other, and then one of them took off his mask with him, and there was this huge thing starting just by putting that forward that, no, these measures are illegal, and you don't have to cooperate. And in fact, you're committing a crime when you're cooperating with them. So those are the kinds of things that we can do to really spark something way beyond our numbers, and because of civil disobedience, to say, no, we're going to go out publicly and take our masks off and burn the masks, or go into a building as a group unmasked and say, to create a counter momentum. That's really what civil disobedience does, and that's kind of the idea behind what's going to start tomorrow. You should talk about that, how you want to do that in your community, some ideas you might have to create active civil disobedience. There'll be more guidelines coming out tomorrow in a YouTube broadcast that we'll send to you.
Okay, so I will send that out to our members. So if you're not a member with the Atlantic Common Law Assembly just means we have your email address, your mailing address, so we know you're a real person, and your phone number, so we can connect with you and let you know where the meetings are. So again, if you would like this correspondence that we receive from the Republic, you can, I think Charlene is there, and she's our secretary coordinator for the assembly. So you can connect with Charlene if you're interested in that, and then we can get the information out to you tomorrow that Kevin's referring to as well. But this week we had sort of an eventful week on Monday because a group of mothers went to Yarmouth. So Yarmouth is about 5 hours from Halifax on the other side of the province. And there was this young mother whose kids weren't allowed into school. She had mask exemptions, and she'd set up an appointment, a meeting with the principal and also the director, I guess the executive director of the health board. And they were sort of trying to isolate her and separate her from us. They wanted her to go into the boardroom, you know, herself. And myself and Kieran and Anastasia and Linda just sort of, you know, walked right in with her. And it was, you know, they were just really uncompromising. They just weren't going to allow her kids in school, even though she had mask exemption. So we presented them with the law that was passed and the stand down order and a 16-page report of the research that shows the dangers in masking up healthy kids. And, you know, said we'd hold them personally liable, not just for damages that were done in the way of their education or having to pay for homeschool and that sort of thing, but damages that are done to the kids that are having to wear the masks. So the face infections, the lung infections, the dizziness, the headaches. Yeah. And, you know, I think they were a little shaken by that they could be held personally accountable for those things. But anyway, we left, and then we had our signs. So we went down on the corner of the street, and we were, you know, screaming, "Don't unmask the kids, unmask the kids." And people were going by and beeping their horn for support. So we stayed around for about an hour right outside their office, and just to let everybody know we were there, you know. But I think this is that's part of maybe the civil disobedience that you're talking about. It's, you know, I always remember the quote by Gandhi that, you know, when the government becomes lawless or corrupt, it's our sacred duty to resist. You know, I mean, allowing kids to be smothered by a corrupt government when there's no evidence. I mean, every mother should have been out there with us, standing up for the kids. So when you say civil disobedience, it doesn't have to be, you know, burning a mask. It can be just standing without a mask, saying, I love my kids and I'm standing up for truth and justice about that. So I don't know if you have any comment on that, but that's my interpretation.
Absolutely. It's exactly what you need to do. Congratulations. That's beautiful. And, you know, civil disobedience is by its nature not violent, but the system sees it as violent because you're disrupting something, which they interpret as an act of violence, right? And so, you know, whatever you do, like let's say they bring in curfews, which has been talked about. In some cities, they already have them. London, England, they have a 10 p.m. curfew. You can't come out. And as a matter of fact, in places like, it gets even worse, in places like Hong Kong and South Korea, they brought in laws allowing the police to shoot people on sight if they're out after curfew, right? So, I mean, they put out those things to get people really scared. So what you do is after a curfew, you have a mass disobedience and get people walk down the street together and just defy the curfew. Mm-hmm. And there's lots of literature on civil disobedience. I've helped organize workshops on what to do, role playing and all that. So that's something we should, you know, consider doing. Just a workshop on civil disobedience, what it looks like. Gandhi's a good one to read. Henry Thoreau, who wrote On the Duty of Civil Disobedience, the American writer in the 1800s, who didn't pay taxes, who went to jail for it. He didn't want to fund the Mexican-American War, so he didn't do that. So all of those things, just resistance at every level is what stops the machine. And we have to think of creative ways to do that are going to encourage people to carry that on, do it themselves, right?
One of our members is just saying she called 811 and the Nova Scotia Health Authority, and she tagged Robert Strang, who's the chief medical officer who's put through these measures and masking. You know, Dr. Strang said back in May that masks were useless and not a means of preventing virus. So he's totally taken, you know, a 180 turn. But anyway, this member says that she called 811, Nova Scotia Health Authority, tagged Robert Strang on Facebook, and told them I was going to hold them liable if my health gets worse, or if I get sick, or my husband will be holding them liable if I die, because they're not allowing people to get blood work done for any reasonable amount of time. This is going to kill people. It's not sustainable. Anyways, I have an appointment tomorrow instead of over 2 months from now when I'd probably be dead. This was all yesterday. So I feel like telling them I'm holding them accountable and they're liable really freaked out someone. So thank you for that story, Shannon. But again, that would be another example of just civil disobedience, in a way of just standing your ground for what's true and just.
That's right.
Andrew, long history with Bermuda. Okay, I don't know if there's any questions here from the chat box. I'm having trouble kind of talking and reading at the same time. Maybe we'll go back to another question from, do we have another question here? Politicians, no, I think we answered that one. Okay, so any other questions from the chat box here? Kevin, do you have anything you want to add about that?
Well, yeah, you know, there were some encouraging things that have been happening. We have to always be like Sun Tzu says, you watch your opponent to see how they react, to test their strengths and weaknesses, right? And several things have happened this past week. Not only are elections being announced, right, but there was a little news item. Barbados just declared themselves a British monarchy, right? Now, that's very interesting, because one of the ways, as a movement like ours builds, the system quickly responds by creating their own controlled alternative. We saw it in the campaign about the residential school genocide. They eventually were forced to announce their Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which was run by the very churches and government that did the crime. They investigated themselves, and then they announced that things were all healed. But they had to do that to contain what we were doing and put their own spin on it. I can predict that within, I think, less than a year, people in power in Canada are going to talk about the need for a republic and for Canada to be finally independent, and just take the Queen out and put a president in instead of a governor general, right? Like change the figurehead a bit. That's how the system responds to us. And the very fact that they're talking elections, that this news item about Barbados becoming a republic, and the police are actually saying to us, yeah, show that document, the law. When somebody was asked what to do when somebody was confronting them about masking, a Victoria policeman said, just show them that law of yours. Like he knew it was legitimate because it was passed by people in their own defense, right? So all of those little indicators show that we're having an impact, but they will never acknowledge it. They'll just try to take our energy and turn it to their advantage, but we just keep doing it. It's like the jujitsu all the time. We keep taking what they do and turn it our way. They'll keep trying to do that with us. Just something to flag for people to keep in mind, that we can't do anything that'll foster the illusion that the system is going to, because the only way they respond is to do it on their terms, not to actually change. I mean, that's hard-won lessons being learned about that, right? And
just, again, like you said, to stay flexible and adaptable to what their next move is, like in martial arts. And you know, to take whatever they throw towards you and redirect it into where you want it to go is kind of playing the game, right? So Shannon also says, funny thing too, about the same story. Last night, 10 hours after she kind of lost it on everyone about not being able to get the blood work done, Atlantic CTV, that's a local news channel, comes out with an article about blood wait times. And the government is sorry, and they're working on it and is aware of the problem. So it seems coincidental, but yeah, that they would have taken her upset, right, and then turned it to their own advantage to make it look like, you know, it seems. Yeah.
Well, because the people in power are far more vulnerable than we realize, you know, and You see, we're used to thinking short term, like, okay, we do a little lobby campaign and then we get a result. And it's very unilateral on our part. We got to think in a much longer term dynamic way where we do something, they respond, we do something. You got to see it as a process where we always have to be watching and learning from a situation, right? It's different than what we've been used to often, right?
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned the election. I had two comments. I want to talk about the election, but first off, we're still in a state of emergency. And our legal justice coordinator, Tara, had found in the Nova Scotia Health Protection Act a clause that was amended June 4th, 2019, that allows the government to remove kids from school without parents' consent, to actually kidnap them, to do testing on them, to quarantine them, to lock them down, to keep them overnight without the parents' consent. So that was a little alarming, especially that it was done, a year before this actual pandemic started.
Yeah, it's like we're under the Indian Act, because that's exactly what they can do to a native child at any time. And well, I mean, the reality is there is no state of emergency. That's there. We disestablish the state of emergency. We say we nullify the state of emergency. We're not going to operate under it, right? Like, that's what the law does. If the NCCLA law of September 8th, it says it's all illegal. If you try to do this stuff, we're holding you accountable not only personally, but we're disestablishing your system, right? It's about unlearning. The first stage is unlearning, and then establishing, and really the way you enforce something isn't by trying to get a politician to do what you want. It's by leaving their system and establishing your own. That's how we enforce our laws, right?
Well, that's just it. That was my journey, right? For 2 years, I've been emailing MLAs in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and speaking to legislatures, and it was really draining my energy. Since I've let go of that paradigm and realized I wasn't being effective in that system, now I have all this energy to put into creating a new system and really feel inspired and enthusiastic, because now I feel like our actions now are making a difference because we're no longer bound under that power. Right? It's
Exactly.
sort of cutting the chains, liberating yourself. Now, the election, you had mentioned.
Very free, yeah, very free. Yeah.
You had mentioned about the election, and you were advising people not to vote, and that we should set up a separate polling station or a separate place to gather members, and to elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, it's an idea that people are getting ready to do. You set up a presence of some kind near the polling stations, and you film it and get it all over YouTube and all over everywhere. And you say to people, don't vote. You're handing over your authority to one woman in London who's already criminally convicted. It's this government is criminal in nature. They're putting themselves above the law. If you mark a ballot, you're ratifying your own slavery. You're approving more slavery and more police state measures by them if you vote. So what we say instead, come over here, mark your ballot for the Republic, which is you. You're voting for yourself. Join a local assembly, learn about the Republic, and switch allegiance. Switch, again, I don't like the word allegiance, but switch your loyalty, switch your citizenship out of Canada into the Republic. That's the idea of using the election as a great platform to get that idea out that there is an alternative for people, right?
So there was a question about this from Anastasia. She says, is the plan to also canvass door to door before the election?
Absolutely. You can say, Dina, you're going to run as a delegate to a future Congress in the Republic. Not to get elected now, but we nominate Dina to be somebody holding the banner of the Republic, or more likely our brother Mike, who's the political animal who loves to do this stuff, or whoever, right? Run him as a delegate for the Republic and go around and educate people. Say, we have an alternative to this criminal system, right? That kind of thing. Just what you normally do in an election campaign, right?
So we have to get Mike. I don't think Mike is on this call, but he was going to give us an update, right? He was going to design our platform and give us sort of step by step on how we could do this, but I haven't connected with him lately. I'm just going through. Operation Lockstep came out. Rockefeller PDF document outlines the entire COVID hoax. Yes. Is the plan also to canvas? We got that one. People shouldn't forget the WEF simulation, Event 201. Yes, I think we know about that, how the government had already planned it. Any other questions? Comments in there? While you're thinking, I have a joke.
Oh, good. I'm not the only one.
It's a lawyer joke. It's a lawyer joke.
Even better.
Doctor, how many autopsies have you performed on dead people? And the witness says, all of them, because the live ones put up too much of a fight. I know, poor taste. So should we be declaring a state of our own emergency to utilize the benefits of the state, but under the pretense of the people being actively usurped? Usurped, thank you. I haven't heard that word. If we cancel the state of emergency, will they shut off utilities to foreclose on assets, destroy people's credit in the current system, or use the energy of the state of emergency for our benefit?
Interesting. Keep thinking, they keep coming up with these creative ideas is great, right? How to turn the table.
Yeah.
I think people should get their money out of banks, because they could, with these bail-ins they have, they can seize any account. No, I don't think they can, under that, they can't seize savings accounts, but I would not have money in banks right now if you can all avoid it. You know, do like my great grandfather did, you know, keep it in the mattress.
Gwen's asking, have your books arrived yet? You know, do you want to tell the story about that, Kevin?
Yes, they went to the wrong address. They went to my old Nanaimo address. They're all the way across the country. So what I'm going to do is get a bunch of them and just mail them to you, because to have another order would be another 3 weeks from the States, which is where they're all printed. So I'm going to put them express delivery, and we can arrange payment after and all that. But I'll send them, I guess, to you, Dana, or we can make that arrangement. I haven't been able to find the PDF, or I'd send it to you right away. My training manual. I don't know where it is. It was published 3 years ago, and I think I've lost it. But
okay. Any other questions? Charlene says, any consideration to having our republic reach out to Bermuda, given its recent separation from the monarchy? Influence of Bermuda to publicly claim a common law jurisdiction and validate our movement internationally.
there's somebody's already doing that.
Okay.
They're in touch. We have kind of like a group working on international relations, because eventually we're going to get other countries to diplomatically recognize us. It was interesting. Vladimir Putin, right when whoever it was, whichever president, Obama or somebody, was criticizing Russia for the Chechnya civil war, and said they would recognize Crimea and Chechnya as separate nations from Russia. Putin turned around and he said, well, then we'll recognize the Lakota indigenous nation, and because Russell Means and the Lakota nation had declared independence in South Dakota from America. And he said, fine, we'll recognize them. So you can play off nations. We've found this with the campaign against the Vatican and their crimes, that, you know, the enemy of my enemy can be my friend. So you find people who don't particularly like the British Crown, countries in the world, and seek diplomatic relations with them as the Republic. I mean, that's definitely in the works as well. So yeah, those people are talking to the folks down there in the Caribbean.
And Norm says, should common law assemblies work on the implementation of the common currency in order to support and build up our local communities?
I'm not sure what that means. Like, how would they?
Norm, maybe you can explain it a little more there. But, you know, the whole idea of not paying taxes, that was shocking to me, that it was illegal, that the income tax was illegal in Canada.
There's no law authorizing income tax in Canada.
So it's illegal, really. I mean, no one can enforce that.
Well, a lot of things are illegal in Canada, but they consider it illegal because the Privy Council gets together and passes what they call a law. But in our tradition, English common law tradition, laws aren't just declared. It has to be approved by the Commons, by Parliament, right? 3/4 of the laws in Canada are never even debated in Parliament. So it's that kind of rule by decree, which is the norm, has been the norm in Canadian history, right?
So somebody was going to send you some information about that very question. I'm not sure what that question was, but they're going to connect with you. I think that's one of our members. Common law 1940s, PEI. My grandfather loaned a shovel to his neighbor. 6 months went by and no shovel. Asked the neighbor for this shovel several times, went to the local courthouse and wrote a 7-word sentence on a napkin. Judge asked in court, Bill, did you borrow Emmett's shovel? Yes, I did. Did you return it? Nope. You owe Emmett 1 shovel. It's really that simple. That's a great story. Thanks, Iron Crow. Anastasia, in
Well,
order,
that's the way things should be, right?
yeah. In order to sell your books on our website, we need a PDF for your books. If you can't find it, would you be willing to make a PDF from copies that Dina has?
Well, you can sell them. You mean just sell the PDF directly, not the book?
Yeah, I guess that's what she meant. Yeah.
If I can find it. I'm looking for the PDFs and would have to start from scratch again. Nobody likes to support Amazon, but they're my only means right now. And I keep ordering big batches of them, and then we can sell them ourselves.
Andrew says, claim beneficiary status on all accounts known and unknown in all states and dimensions. Demand legal payment and cancel all contracts with the fraudulent system. Provincial health card, for example. There are many benefits of birth registration. So worth of accounts we are all listed on. Is that taking all of our money out of the bank? If we were to do that, I guess he means.
Well, we're not listed. Our corporate fiction is listed. So don't forget, I mean, the advantage is you can get the benefits of the system through your straw man. You can also walk away from it at any point because it's not you.
Can you get a certified true copy of the Queen's Bench printer of the income tax? I don't know that. Do you, Kevin? A copy of the Queen's Bench printer of the income tax.
Well, there isn't an income tax. They claim. Here's a funny thing. In Canada, they use the term they exist, but they don't. They have a thing called the Income Tax Act. But again, if you look at the history of these things, they were passed order in council. They were never debated in Parliament. Therefore, they don't have lawful standing. Okay, it was just decreed by somebody, right? Mm-hmm. And they just passed. You might have remembered earlier in this year when Parliament prorogued. They didn't even have 10% quorum, but 32 MPs said, "Bye-bye. We're kind of dissolving ourselves right now." The last thing they did just before doing that, they gave the Privy Council unlimited power to tax without consulting Parliament. Well, this is going back to the Middle Ages. The King of England got his head cut off in 1649 for doing that, for not consulting Parliament when he wanted to tax them. That right, and that's why the American Revolution had over taxation without any representation. So, they just did this in Canada. We're back to the Middle Ages now. Nowhere. I mean, how anyone could possibly vote for that or cooperate with that in any way when you're saying, yeah, we're back in the Middle Ages. We have no rights. We're just chattel. We're serfs. We're techno serfs, right?
Mm-hmm. So Norm says, should we continue to use the fiat currency?
Well, if you got the local store owner would barter, you can work for him for half a day and barter for food. I mean, that could be an alternative, except a barter economy. But short of that, I think eventually people should issue their own local currency. You could talk about how to do that. They've done that a few places in Canada. The community just has their own currency and you become more self-reliant. But short of that, I don't know. What would be the alternative for not using the fiat currency? I mean, at this point, I'm not sure.
Or change to cryptocurrency, Gerald says. You can use them globally, not necessarily just Bitcoin. I guess that's just a comment. And then we have Leonore Zan informed me, I think she is a MLA up in the Valley, I believe. informed me that I have asked her in April that the government cannot seize savings from personal bank accounts. However, they can seize RESPs. Okay, that's interesting. At this time, should we all be obtaining our citizenship card?
I would recommend it. It gives you more protection. You're linked more. It's another level of protection, right, for people. But know what you're joining. Go over the site, republicofcanada.ca, and write to me if you've got any questions.
I think Charlene just put up the link to the Republic site and to the citizenship link. But again, does that invalidate then you as a Canadian citizen?
No, I mean, it's, again, parallel system right now. But you're not a Canadian citizen. You're a subject of the Crown. That's what the capital letter means. You're not a citizen. You're a citizen when you join the Republic because it's been your own choice to do that. And you're outside all jurisdiction. A citizen in a republic has no authority over them save their own covenants and the law, right? There's no ruler. You're the ruler.
Okay, moonshine is a currency around here. Iron gross, that's from PEI, I guess. Sounds like a good one. And RSPs, I guess they can seize too. So Charlene just put the Republic of Canada, the Oath of Citizenship link in there, republicofcanada.ca / Oath of Citizenship. For those who might be listening. And why would you want to accept any titles, let alone citizen? No benefits, only liabilities. Are you referring to the citizenship Iron Crow in the Republic or in as a Canadian citizen? Not sure. In the current system. Okay.
Right.
Current system, yeah.
Well, officially, again, you're not, the official title is not citizen in Canada. You're, they use the term, but formally you're a subject to the Crown. You're subject to the authority of the Crown. Subject. It's like the term, they throw out this term treaty negotiations with natives. There are no treaties because it's nation to nation, and they don't recognize native tribes as nations. They're all subordinate to the Crown. So they use the words to deceive, but it's not the reality of what they're doing, right? Good, I know you're not a subject to anyone. Good. You come to the right place.
So any other questions that I've missed or comments, you can feel free to pop them down there. I would just say again, if you're interested in becoming a member, that you would have access to our Zoom calls on Fridays and also kind of the inner workings. And Charlene's put your website for your radio show up there, bbsradio.com. Here we stand. Kevin has a weekly show, 7 p.m.
I should jump in and just say on that, the last couple of shows we've had some of the West Coast organizers of the different assemblies on to talk about their experiences and lessons learned. And it's really helpful for people who have practical questions of like how the thing evolves and roadblocks, the attempts to sabotage, all of that. So they're all archived at that site. You just scroll down on that site and you'll see all the past shows for 5 years, archived since, starting with the more recent one. So
that would be interesting. Maybe you could tell the people on this call about the mall in BC that was bought out by the Chinese lady.
Yeah, that's, well, people may or may not know there being more and more sightings all over the West Coast of Chinese troops operating. There was Asian troops in their own uniform jogging down a road on Salt Spring Island last week. Hovercrafts, Chinese insignia off the coast of Vancouver Island. And recently, the first mall in Canada to declare that you have to be medically tested before you can walk into the mall was in the Woodgrove Mall on the north side of Nanaimo. It was just bought by a Chinese citizen. She's not even resident here. She's buying up all the malls in Nanaimo, and she's imposing this mandatory medical thing, even though she's not a citizen. Just so people are going to the Nanaimo City Council trying to get her thing canceled, and one of the people in the Nanaimo Assembly even wants to issue a banning order against her, telling her to get the hell out of Canada. So there's going to be people at the mall telling people don't go in, don't get medically tested. She has no authority requiring that you do this. It's against the law anyway, the whole bit. So it's given good grist for our mill. But yeah, it's an example of that whole. There's also reports the Canadian military actually been withdrawn from BC. One of the artillery regiments in Seaforth Armories in Vancouver was ordered back east. So I think it's part of Trudeau's deal to turn over the West Coast to China. You know, as his legislation has Foreign Investment Protection Act, which allows China to station their troops on Canadian soil. So another point to raise during the election that the man is an out committing treason, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was quite shocking. And of course, your books are available on the website, right? At Murder by Decree. Maybe Charlene, you could put in that right now for people who can't wait. They may want to go to the website, but again, that's through Amazon.
Murderbydecree.com is the website.
Yeah, she just, thank you. Yeah, she
Okay.
just put that up. Please tell Kevin that it makes me sick that he isn't making any money off his books on Amazon.
Well, they find it very difficult to afford royalties. We haven't gotten a royalty in over 6 months. So that's why we encourage people to get the books directly from me. I get authors discount. I order a whole bunch and then you can buy them. So that way I get some of the money.
So any other questions? We're coming up onto the hour. I don't know if you have any closing thoughts. I hate to go just yet because I'm sure there's going to be some more questions come up. Let me just look over my notes.
What will things look like the day after a republic is physically established? It has been physically established. It's just a matter of growing it now, sinking its roots deeper. And eventually it means starting at the neighborhood level, taking back your communities, self-governance. The country will look very different. It'll be the way it's meant to be, right? Land of liberty and plenty, to quote my ancestor, the one who took up arms against the crown.
And I think, you know, in the assembly that we've established here, we have kind of like a sacred duty and commitment and love for each other. You know, we're all kind of on the same page, understanding, you know, the tyranny. And when you're out in public, you sort of feel, you know, a little strange, right? That everyone's wearing masks. It's like you're in a movie. I feel like I'm in a movie. So at our gathering on the weekend, you know, there's 100 people there. No one was wearing a mask. We were hugging, kissing. It was just like old times, you know.
Yep.
You don't see any masks around. So it's good for your soul, like to be with people that share your same values. And you know, I think for me, it's been amazing. One of the members, who was that? Janice had posted the video today that we did in Yarmouth of the mother that I just mentioned, and posted it on a Mommy's site, Mommy's Helping Mummies site, and there's, I don't know, 20,000 people, and she was just attacked, right? The video was attacked, though. You know, I was a real whack job for mentioning that it was a fake pandemic, and I thought, you know what? If it's only 64 cases, I mean, you got to call it like this, right?
Exactly. Well, that's, Dina, from a point of view of just mental and emotional health, it's important to do what we're doing, because otherwise you go crazy. Although my attitude is when I see the people like this, I go like, they're the ones who are crazy and strange. And I look at them oddly, right? Like, are you nuts?
But sometimes, you know, it wears on you if you're constant, right? In a masked crowd. So it's good to be with other people. And then you kind of use each other's momentum and energy to kind of spread the message further. And you're there to back each other up. So this young mother I don't know if she's on the call line, but yes, she is on the call. She is. Caitlin, she's on the call. That's great. But, you know, she would have been railroaded by these two guys that wanted to pull her into the boardroom. But suddenly, you know, the females outnumbered the males, and they weren't going to, you know, we weren't.
Excellent. What she did, you know, it's like you're quoting from my whistleblower manual, because I said, whenever you negotiate, don't do it on their terms, do it on yours. Bring in witnesses, turn the tables on them, and because psychologically they try to trap you and intimidate you in those situations, right?
Yeah, so it was really great. I'm sure it was good for her. She was really appreciative that we all kind of drove down to support her, but it was also good for us. You know, we really felt good being there, you know, for another mother who was struggling. So it bonds right between us. So, and now Caitlin's here on the call tonight. So thanks for arriving. Gerald, establishing a community seems simpler than convincing the insane masked majority. Oh, that's it. That's it, Anastasia. A call for court to be convened for treason against all whom are complicit. I don't know if that was a question or just a comment. We're planning a community, I think. Andrew?
A practical note on that, never put a whole system on trial.
How do you mean?
You've got to name individuals. In a common law court, you've got to find somebody who embodies the problem and name them. Because you can't try a whole system. You need to name the system as criminal, but in a common law court, individuals have to be named who seem to embody. It's like in the Nuremberg trials, right? What did they do? They took leading figures, political, military, doctors who did medical experiments, all this stuff, and name them because that's our principle of holding people personally liable, right? Individuals are causing this. They've got to be named and called out, right? And you lose some of the impact if you're saying the whole system is evil, right? I mean, we all know that, but you got to get more specific and in a way to turn the table, right?
So are other assemblies thinking about establishing physical communities or towns?
Well, people are working on getting off the grid. I just got an email from a woman just outside Sault Ste. Marie in Ontario who has 20 acres and said, I want to open this up to anyone who wants to set up the republic in the countryside. So a place children can come to, it's exciting. There's 2 of those places in BC, a couple now in Ontario. We've got to encourage that. If you know anyone in land in the Maritimes, start working on that. It may in the long run be one of the most important things we do, right? Build those sanctuaries.
Andrew said we're looking at 600 to 700 acres. That's great. Gerald,
a lot of work.
Yeah. That's good. So any closing questions, comments? We're coming up to the hour, so we'll probably close out soon. But maybe just to remind you that if you're not a member and you want to be a member, that means you just have access to some of the inner workings of our assembly. You can connect with Charlene, who's put her email up there. She's our secretary coordinator. If you are a member, you can send in questions to these Wednesday Zoom calls and we can answer them here. We're also having a Zoom workshop for members on Friday at 7 p.m. So I'd mention that too. Kevin's radio show link is here. The BBC radio, Here We Stand. The BBS, thank you. Murder by Decree. Maybe you can give your websites so I don't mix them up. murderbydecree.com.
Yeah, that's the background and a lot of the history. Murderbydecree.com, canada.ca, bbsradio.com/Here We Stand. And I'm angelfire101 at protonmail.
There you go. And Anastasia says she likes the word sanctuary as, I guess, the space where we'd create. So again, if there's no more comments, questions, Kevin, did you have any closing?
Just that I want to get, tomorrow I want to get a bunch of these books mailed to you, Dina. So send me a mailing address and I'll get a bunch to everyone.
Okay, we'd appreciate that. And we can talk, maybe there's something we can do in the interim, or I'll connect with you tomorrow and see about that.
Okay.
But, thank you for being here again. Thank you for your mentorship. Thank you for sharing. I think it's really valuable. Your character often comes into question, right? Is that you never, even the people who are judging you and trying to discredit you, you're always so gracious and not engaging that. So I really appreciate that about you. So it's a pleasure having you here, and we're appreciating your guidance and mentorship through this process.
Thank you, Dana. We always have to keep the high ground in everything we do. So.
Great. And your email's up there in the chat box. So if there's no other questions, we're going to be, for members, have the Zoom call on Friday at 7 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time. And we'll be here again next week on this Zoom. If you're interested in being a member, follow along with the links, connect with Charlene. So thank you. Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Thanks.
Talk to you soon.